Now to the conflict that's, of course, escalating in the Middle East between Israel and Iran as both countries keep trading direct strikes with each other. Earlier today, the Israeli military said it struck the command center of Iran's Quds force, as well as missile sites in the central part of the country. Citing Iranian state media, NBC News is reporting that Israeli strikes in Iran have killed over 220 people since Friday, with over 90% of the fatalities reported to be civilians. The initial Israeli strikes took out multiple Iranian military leaders and top nuclear scientists. On Friday, Iran launched ballistic missiles into Tel Aviv and has continued its attacks in the days since. Overnight, missiles hit the northern Israeli city of Haifa. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office released a statement this morning saying 24 Israeli civilians have been killed in that retaliatory attack. With us now, live from Tel Aviv, is NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley. Matt, what can you tell us about the situation as it stands right now?
Well, I can tell you, Joe, what I saw, what I heard late last night here in the southern part of Tel Aviv. I was woken up in the middle of the night, as I have been for the past couple of days and nights, including during the day. We saw a brazen daytime attack by the Iranians just yesterday. But we get up, we hear this siren, you hear these alerts on your phone. Everybody rushes into these safe rooms or sort of bunkers inside these buildings. And I got to tell you, Joe, this is what is the cause of these low fatalities amongst Israelis. You saw in the numbers you just gave, the numbers of Iranian civilians who have been killed in Israeli attacks are about 10 times the number that we're seeing killed here in Israel. And we went yesterday to Bat Yam, which was one of the areas also here in southern Tel Aviv, where there was an entire 10-story building with the front of it just sheared right off. 6 people were killed, a very high number of civilians killed in one attack by Israeli standards. But according to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, everybody who was killed had not managed to make it to the safe rooms, to these bunkers. So really, the reason why we're seeing such a low fatality is because of the early warning systems, because of the Iron Dome, the Arrow systems, the other air defense systems like David Sling that have been swatting a lot of these Iranian projectiles out of the sky, and because almost every building in this country has one of these bunkers, has one of these safe rooms that allows people to get to cover, and that essentially means you're going to survive in almost every case if you make it to one of these rooms. So that's why we're seeing such a low level of casualties here in Israel. In Iran, we're also seeing a move to targeting economic targets, oil facilities and gas fields. That's a big escalation by the Israelis.
All right, NBC's Matt Bradley, live from Tel Aviv. We greatly appreciate it. Please stay safe. And with us, we have now the co-host of our fourth hour, contributing writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass, and co-founder and CEO of Axios, Jim VandeHei. So, Richard Haass, let's begin with you. The situation continues to escalate with Israel and Iran trading attacks against each other. I guess the question that's being asked right now by a lot of observers is how much longer can Iran continue this? It seems in just about every category, Israel has the upper hand. What are you hearing?
Well, for Iran, they've got to decide just that. And in particular, let me give you one analogy. When they were fighting the Iran-Iraq war, the decade-long struggle in the 80s, the Ayatollah Khomeini at one point said, he'd never accept a ceasefire, and then he did. And he said, this is like drinking poison to me. But he decided to drink poison in order to preserve the Iranian revolution. So the question is whether the authorities in Iran essentially find this an analogous situation, and they would accept some type of a peace deal. We can talk about that, what the details would be, or whether they basically say they worry they can't survive after this defeat militarily, and they go the opposite direction, which would be war widening, to essentially try to bring the Arabs into the war, to attack oil refineries and installations, attack shipping. And the theory behind that would be they could then make the war so expensive for the United States and Europe that they would hope that the U.S. would put diplomatic pressure on Israel to end the war. So I think the Iranian authorities are very much coming to that fork in the road where they've got to decide whether to widen and escalate on one hand, or whether to begin to get diplomacy in gear and to bring this to an end. And then they would have to decide, go out so long, how much they would give up on the nuclear side.
So Richard, let me ask you, for those of us who have seen since 1979 Iran being the epicenter of global terrorism, of being, the most feared power in the Middle East outside of Israel, the question is, how did their defenses become so stripped down? How did they become so weak? How have their air defenses been crushed to a point now where they really are at the mercy of Israel? Israel can do just about anything that it wants to do with Iran. What happened? When did it happen? Why are they so ill prepared? The New York Times reporting that they're not even communicating with their people. They don't have the bomb shelters that Israel has. People are standing on top of the roofs because they don't have bomb shelters to go to. What's happened? Was this supposedly fearsome Islamist republic? Why are they now seemingly helpless?
I have two thoughts about that, Joe. It's a really interesting question. One is they had a layered defense. Think about it. You had Hezbollah, you had Hamas, you had the friendship with the Syrian government. So they had all these proxies and partners getting help from Russia, from China. And their strategic position just deteriorated dramatically over the last year. And then secondly, Israel took it to them in ways that my guess is they didn't imagine. That the Israelis, almost like the Ukrainians and the Russians, had upped their game and introduced a new level of warfare. And the Iranians, I think, I guess the word I would use is complacent. They thought they could hide behind their proxies, above all Hezbollah, which they thought was keeping Israel in check. And they just didn't imagine the degree of innovation that Israel could bring to the war. And they were essentially a generation or two behind.
Now, let's bring in right now columnist and associate editor for the Washington Post, David Ignatius, to get more insights on this. I guess, David, the question right now is as escalation continues, and again, as Iran seems, at least, based on the reports we've heard, to be basically helpless from stopping these Israeli attacks. Even they're saying as much. Question is, why would Israel stop against an implacable foe who, since their creation in 1979, has made their existence about the destruction of Israel and the destruction of America about as much as anything else? It's hard to see a Netanyahu, who the world couldn't bring to the peace table for Hamas or Hezbollah. Hard to imagine Netanyahu basically stopping the attacks now that Iran seems so helpless. What are you hearing?
So, Joe, first, I think your description is entirely accurate. Israel now has operational control of the skies, or certainly over Tehran, and it appears over much of Iran, in a way that it can just choose targets now. It decides that it's going to take out the Quds Force leadership, and it appears in an operation overnight they did just that. It's said that they could have targeted the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, but decided against it. So they get to choose targets now, but there isn't really a target that says, here's how to end the war. I think Israel faces a problem a bit like what it faces in Gaza. You can have total dominance. I mean, Gaza is just almost undefended, and yet Israel's had trouble ending the war, getting somebody with whom it can make a deal that finally brings the conflict to an end, and who is prepared to surrender to Israeli power. You're not going to find an Iranian surrender mandate until you have regime change there. So I think inevitably Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel has talked more and more over the last several days about a regime change option. Talking yesterday to Iranians who monitor the situation back home very closely, their view is that the Israelis are not really much closer to having a regime change plan than they are to having a strategy for a new Gaza. Just they're not good at that strategic thinking. So I think that's really the bottom line for me today, Joe, is how do the Israelis imagine bringing this to an end? They're going to have increasing pressure from President Trump, who would like to be the peacemaker, who's talking with Russian President Putin about what appears to be a joint effort for peace. The Israelis are going to have a very clear, well-enunciated plan for where they go next to resist the pressure that they'll make to end the war.